Destro. I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Forum BX257, here to bring you our old G.I. Joe toy review, a second look at one of my top 10 favorite figures, and in fact, my favorite Cobra figure of all time, the Enemy Weapon Supplier, the 1983 Destro. Now, Destro first appears in the comic books in issue 11. However, he's drawn in shadow, and he isn't actually named until issue 14, where he is basically revealed to the Baroness, a scene which forever cements the then secret and then rather more open relationship that they would have throughout the media. He first makes his appearance in the cartoons in the very first episode of the 5-part miniseries A Real American Hero. Destro was available in 1983, 1984, and 1985. So he's actually a fairly easy figure to find on the aftermarket. One of the things that really attracts me to Destro is how strong of a character he is, but also, even though he's kind of cold and he's obviously a bad guy, but he, at least in the cartoon comic books, I should say, he does really have a very, very honorable tone to him. In the cartoons, he was still rather cool with very, very cool lines, very quotable lines, in fact. One last interesting thing is Destro's code name, and it definitely is a code name in the very beginning because the way it's mentioned and the way it's handled in the early comic books, it's definitely not supposed to be part of his name, as it's been retconned into recently. You would think that it would be a derivation of the word destroy, because he is an enemy weapon supplier, and therefore destroying things is his way of life. However, in Italian, the word destro means right-handed. And as he was introduced in the beginning of the comic books, he is hired basically by Cobra Commander, who sees himself as a general, and hires Destro to be his field commander. And in Italian, Destro could also mean, in certain crime circles, as Il Destro, the right-hand man to the boss. While Destro's sculpt is pretty fair, he has tiny little details such as the little communicator or radio, whatever that is, on his lapel there, and the tiny little wrist rockets on his gauntlets. And even his hands are actually sculpted kind of like ribs, almost like they're armored or something. But you have to admit, Destro was a very, very strange design. His whole head is vac metallized chrome. It's supposed to be a mask, obviously in the file card and in his story, but it's like his whole head is like a robot head. But then he has this open chest with like a almost 70s chain on there. It really does seem like a design meant to be like a copycat of late 70s, early 80s Star Wars influence. Destro comes with his tiny little high-density laser pistol. There are people who tend to think that this looks a bit like a Mauser broom handle. One could say that it's also probably influenced by the machine pistols like a Scorpion VZ61. And he has a detachable armed attaché case. And while it's very plain, it opens up to reveal a lot of sculpted detail. There is a takedown M16 or AR on one side and a whole bunch of accessories on the other. This tube on the bottom, I keep thinking is like some type of silencer or blowgun or something like that, but people have pointed out that it actually has fins on the very end of it, so it's actually some type of a mortar round or shell of some kind. Destro is a very, very tall figure on top of all that. Again, it's probably a sort of a Darth Vader influence in that. A regular figure, which would have come out at the same time, is just a rather touch shorter. So Destro was just a touch under 4 inches. So you can see from here. he really is closer in height to something like Sergeant Slaughter, who is pretty much 4 inches dead on. It's just the hat, really, which gives him that height. Destro, well, he has two variants. One is the obvious variant, which I have here, and right here should be the copyright date, but there's nothing there. But most of the time, you will actually find the copyright date on the inner left thigh here. I believe that this is a later version because the other variant to the figure is the file card variant. And most of them came like this, with G.I. Joe underneath his portrait. And as he was released in 1983, 84, and 1985, it's only the 85 versions which have finally Cobra underneath his portrait. And I believe this actually belongs to the version with no copyright on his thigh, seeing as these are both rather hard to get.